Hello, I'm Brandy Agerbeck of LooseTooth.com, and last week I introduced you to the flag. Now this again goes hand in hand with the filter. You use the flag to highlight, to set apart different ideas with very simple, small visual marks. So it could be as simple as a bullet point. It can be things like highlighting and circling, and it can certainly be adding different icons to represent different ideas. So today I want to demonstrate exactly how that filter and that flag work hand in hand. Here I've got on my itty bitty dry erase board, I've just got these different sort of dummy ideas written in, each one of these is one single idea from a brainstorm. So let's say we're in a divergent model where we're just getting all this stuff out of our heads and onto some surface. So in this case, I'm getting these ideas for, let's say, different marketing ideas on how to market the idea shapers. And I'm just getting them down on the page. I'm not doing any kind of judgment yet. So then I set what my criteria are. And in this case, in this demonstration, one set of criteria is just that gut check, which, as I've said, is one of my absolute favorites. So a gut check about how do I feel about this particular idea. And the second filter is money. So is this an idea that's going to take a lot of money to put out in the world, or is it a cheaper idea to execute? So I'm going to do that. And in doing that, I'm going to add those flags, add those markers to these ideas. Now, very simply, like you've seen already, for the gut check, that flag is going to be a set of smiley faces, meh faces, frowny faces. And for the resources, it's just going to be dollar signs. So, really obvious choices, but they work. But what I'm doing is I'm going into this selection process, into this filtering process, into this sorting process, knowing what my criteria are, what my filters are, and how I'm going to mark them visually on this whiteboard. So that's the important thing, is know what criteria you're working towards and know how you're going to flag those, so you sort of create this sorted index for yourself on the board. So stay tuned. Here I go. All right, so now if you take a peek at this whiteboard, and I'll try not to get the glare of the lights on it, I have added those two different sets of flags to each of these items. So every single item on this board has the gut check icon, which is in red. Again, it's just a really simple smiley face, meh face, frowny face. And then the amount of resources it would take to execute that idea are drawn in dollar signs next to it. But you can see I made consistent choices throughout the board. Made those choices up front and just made sure I use them consistently. So you can very easily at a glance see exactly where you're at. You're always looking to the red marks, the red flags, to figure out the gut check, to remind yourself of the gut check. You're always looking at the green to know how you're sorting out the resources. So now what I'm going to do is see how things shake out. And I think one thing that's really useful is, as you're doing that sorting, doing what I was just doing, it isn't about worrying about how one flag relates to the other flag yet. Right now, it's just first I went through and did all the gut check icons, and then I went through and did all the dollar signs. And because the next iteration, the next layer of meaning making in this drawing, that's when you look at how the two relate to each other. So it can be very useful to not get into that kind of, when you get into that overthinking point where you're like, well, yeah, I like this idea, but it's really expensive. But what if it was this? And what if it was that? Like, that's fine. You can do that later. But really, if you start out just with a really quick sweep of, first I'm going to index these with these flags, next I'm going to index and sort these with these flags, it can help you stay on task and get those really immediate answers down. And certainly, if you felt like you really didn't have any kind of read on something, put a question mark down. If you didn't have a gut check that told you one thing or the other, a little different than sort of the neutral, put a question mark down. If you don't know how much resources, how much money it would take to execute an idea, put a question mark down. There's nothing wrong with that. But try to get something down for each one so you can really sort out your thinking on the next step. So now with the next step, I'm going to look at each of those items and how those two different sets of flags relate to each other. So I can get a very quick read of, okay, what is it that I can execute immediately because it's low cost and I'm excited about it? What's something that is maybe high cost, but I'm really excited about it, and so figuring out like maybe there's some quick hits, quick, fast, cheap things I could do first, that when more income comes in, when more sales come in, I could do maybe the higher price things later. Also, it'll help me figure out what is it I don't want to do. Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe it's just that thing where I'm like, ugh, I'm just not digging it. So now I'm going to add those marks, this next set of highlights based on making those decisions, looking at the two together. All right, here is my next level of information, and let's see how well this shows up on screen. Basically, I used black marker just to X out the things that I was not interested in doing, and also maybe it was a higher investment. It just turned out with this particular set, there wasn't anything that was like something I was super excited but really expensive. This guy, but I'll explain that in a second. But generally, it was really easy to knock out the stuff where I'm just like, I just don't want to do it. Right? That gut check just told me like, this isn't that important. It's not something I want to do. Again, I know this is all kind of in theory because this is just an example, but those would be the kind of things where you say either wait, this is way too expensive, or I really don't want to do this, X them out. Now with a whiteboard, you could actually erase them, but I like Xing things out so you still have that idea on the page, but it's a very clear, in this case, these 5 things are now off the table. But maybe 6 months from now, I look at this list again and I go, you know what? That thing I wasn't excited for before was because I wasn't ready. So now I look at this one and go, you know what? I'm feeling a lot more excited about that one. Let's put it back on the table. Now, that's a reason to not erase things. In this particular case of a whiteboard, you could make this drawing, snap a photo, look at it later. But certainly if this was done on paper and you save that paper drawing, you could easily go back and maybe bring back some of those ideas that didn't work right now. So very simply using the X flags. So far we've got the flags for the gut check in red. We've got the flags for the amount of resources in green. Now we've added the X'd out flags that's saying no go right now. And then I've got 3 other types of flags. The first is the circling the ideas that are the things I definitely want to do. In this case, let's see if you can see that there. Here, I've got, instead of it circled, I've got these nice spark marks that are like, I'm really excited about this one. This one, super excited about it, low cost. Like, how could I not do it, right? But I'm making a different kind of highlight so I can see that this is not just a selection, it's the selection I'm really excited about. And so that is, another type, and the last type was, in this case, adding these words for sequence. So in this case, like my example, these were 2 where they were low cost and I'm excited about them, so let's do them right away. Let's say my bank account is empty, or low, let's not say empty, low, these would be really easy things to do immediately. But this idea here, really fantastic, strong idea, but it's going to take a lot of resources. So I used another kind of flag with this text to mark, hey, let's do these 2 now. Let's save this idea for later when I have more resources to do that thing. So I hope that this demonstration, even though I know it was just in theory and kind of abstracted with the lack of text here, actual text, hopefully you can see that a drawing can actually hold a lot of different layers of flags. You can actually sort out a lot of information, but as long as you know what criteria are you using, what filters are you using, and using a specific flag for each of those things, then using each of those different flags consistently through the drawing. So that's how you can get a lot of decision making, a lot of prioritization, a lot of good thinking and clarification for yourself with very simple flags, as long as you're thinking about them clearly up front and applying them consistently through your process. So that is our second video on the flag. I certainly hope you found it useful. I certainly hope you will put this in practice for yourself. And by all means, if you have any questions or comments, please add them below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.